here is Bernie Sanders laying out the different visions of healthcare and what we can use our resources for in comparison to Bobby Kennedy.
68,000 people a year die because they don't get to a doctor when they should. Is healthcare a human right? Will you work with us to guarantee healthcare to every man, woman, and child in America?
Well, I think you're asking two different questions. You're asking a philosophical question about whether it is a human right, like a constitutional right. As an attorney, I would say that it's not a right of a kind that we otherwise enshrine in the Constitution, because healthcare costs your neighbor money.
Can you pause?
Get your hand out of my pocket. The money I've inherited.
Healthcare costs your neighbor money. Now we're back.
Ben Shapiro territory.
Yep, this is libertarianism. But yep, Bernie didn't ask if it was a civil right. Bernie didn't ask if it was a civil right. He asked if it was a human right, which is a very different thing. Go back a little bit. Just want to also point out that sleight of hand.
Let's pretend like everyone wants to get so philosophical. No, this is a policy question. Should healthcare be guaranteed by our government or not? We don't need to think about what was in Thomas Jefferson's head about this.
Yeah.
Man, woman, and child in America.
Well, I think you're asking two different questions. You're asking a philosophical question about whether it's
very
a
practical.
Human right, like a constitutional right. As an attorney, I would say that it's not a right of a kind that we otherwise enshrine in the Constitution, because healthcare costs your neighbor money. If I smoke cigarettes for 20 years, I make that choice, which is my choice.
I don't mean to, I don't have a lot of time, so I just.
Thank you.
But I am here.
If you ask if you're asking me a philosophical question,
no.
I gotta, give you a thoughtful answer.
Within 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Probably.
It's not like freedom of speech, which costs, everybody.
But every other country, Mr. Secretary.
I would just Google what RFK's freedom of speech costs, say, people in American Samoa, and how he runs away from that. But I'll just let it play.
It's not like freedom of speech, which costs, everybody.
But every other country, Mr. Secretary, every other country guarantees health care to all people as a right. Should we, as Americans?
The objective is to get Americans the level of health care that they want, the choice which Americans want.
What?
Americans
They don't want the choice to be uninsured.
Well, but
they don't want the choice to die because they don't get to a doctor on time.
Americans prefer private insurance to other insurance sources.
Yeah.
We know what this guy is. Come on, folks.
He's lying at the end there. That's actually not true. Medicare and Social Security, Medicare is extremely, extremely popular. And if he wants to talk about how there's scarce resources, I don't agree with that. We now have wealth concentration at the very top that could be clawed back to fund healthcare for even people that Bobby Kennedy would deem as takers of everybody else's healthcare, like if you smoke cigarettes your whole life, or if you're like Bobby Kennedy and you engage in recreational drug use, like of heroin and things like that. I guess he would think, if he wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth,
taking vacations all the time,
right, that would preclude him from getting healthcare in the future, because he didn't take care of his body when he was young. How dare he ask for healthcare later on in his life?
To give people a level of healthcare that they'd like.
But if we're talking about what is the most efficient way, if you're saying there's a limited number of resources and that human rights, freedom of speech, that doesn't affect your neighbor, I don't know if that's necessarily true. Perhaps later we'll talk about how Joe Rogan thinks that Kanye's extremely anti-Semitic song should be allowed to go everywhere. But Medicare spends up to 7 times less than private insurers on administrative costs. It is a more efficient system by definition. 1, because it's not profit motivated. 2, because there is nobody in between you and Medicare. Private insurers act like middlemen. They act like the mafia, where they take a cut because they are the gatekeepers between you and your healthcare. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. And what Bernie Sanders is showing there is the hollowness of the Make America Healthy Again mantra as a political movement, whatever that means, is because Kennedy says it right there. Well, it shouldn't be a human right, because if you make the wrong choices, if you had an addiction to cigarettes or you ate the wrong food, according to that freak, hey, you're shit out of luck.
It's a health movement for wealthy people that,
Yeah.
I mean, the way he says it costs your neighbor money is exactly, that's everything. That's all that matters to these people. They don't want everyone to be healthy because they want people to live fulfilled lives. They want people to be healthy because they think it'll lower their taxes. And it's really gross.
And to see him say this as a Kennedy too, like, given how LBJ presided over the passage of Medicare, and that was a part of his uncle's legacy too, and given how his father ran his campaign and became more radicalized and was more closely associated with labor unions later in his life, I mean, I don't know. It's such a bastardization of that memory, but that's for him to live with, I guess. And his siblings have said similar things to me.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.